welcome to everybody, and good afternoon. A warm welcome, actually on a very snowy afternoon in Zurich, to today's webinar organized by the ICMA Future Leaders group here in Switzerland. And as you just heard, we're going to spend the next hour looking at the interesting topic of what professional life will be like after the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we're all hoping that this pandemic will be over as soon as possible, that the vaccines take hold and that we can put all this behind us. But the timing of when we can lift the current restrictions is very unclear. And we are seeing that new mutations are emerging. And of course, as we all know, this is a global topic rather than simply national. So even when national travel restrictions and ease, we would still expect to see international travel restrictions persisting. But I think it's already clear how much the pandemic has changed both our professional and our personal lives. And all of us have our own unique personal experiences of that, some unfortunately very, very tragic. From a business perspective, working from home, Zoom meetings, webinars like this, WebEx, etc., have all become commonplace. Just looking at ICMA for a second, all of our European offices are working from home, and we've moved all of our events, our board meetings, committee meetings, etc., into the virtual world. And no member of staff is traveling physically to meet members. And to accommodate this, we've needed to develop new skills and to retool our overall offering as an association. And for example, all of our education courses are now changed to be either online, home study, or alternatively live streamed courses. And we've commented on this on a number of times already, and most recently in the quarterly review released 2 weeks ago. It's clear to us that there's some real advantages to this new way of working, but there are also some significant disadvantages, both from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective with issues around loneliness, isolation, and also mental health issues. Operationally, we find that ICMA remains fully effective, and we can interact with our members and with regulators all over the world using the technology. But there is a question as to how we strengthen our relationships with members, and indeed, how we can build new relationships, not so easy in the virtual world. On the other hand, not flying around to meetings and conferences, and our 600 members are based in over 60 different countries, is highly cost effective and allows us to respond even more quickly to different market themes and issues. So when we put the pandemic eventually behind us, the real question we should consider is whether we will return to the status quo, or has the professional world changed for good? And this is a subject that we'll be debating today. I know that for ICMA, we will want to incorporate the learnings we can draw from this crisis. We will definitely have a more balanced offering between physical and virtual, and we'll also increase the flexibility for our staff to work from home now that we can see it's worked so well. But I also think there's going to be a much more critical approach to physical attendance of meetings. We will only travel physically where it's absolutely necessary. Now, for ICMA, our Future Leaders group is one of the two most important outreach groups, the other being the ICMA Women's Network. And of course, the topic really has the greatest relevance to professionals in this group. And why do I say that? Well, the ICMA Future Leaders group is for professionals at an early stage in their careers. So it's this group that has the longest professional career in front of them. Hence, it matters most to them. As they develop their careers, they need to be able to build their knowledge, build their skills, and their networks. So the question is, what future model will allow them to do this most successfully? I'm particularly grateful to two of the people who are on the steering committee of the Future Leaders Group, and that's Charlotte Muller from Swiss Re and Max Weiss from UBS. We're just about to hear from them. I know that both of you have put an enormous amount of thought and effort into organizing today's event and to ensuring there are such interesting and diverse group of people on the panel. So many thanks to both of you, and also many thanks to those of you on our panel today. I'm looking forward to a very interesting debate and discussion. And with that, I'd like to hand over to you, Max, to introduce the panel.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you everyone for joining the call today. My name is Max Weiss. I'm a director in the debt capital markets team of UBS in Zurich, and hosting alongside me today is Charlotte Miller, a vice president in the macro investment strategy team with Swiss Re. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present today's panelists. With us today, we have Dr. Gunnar Hauptmann, head of program at the St. Gallen Symposium, Daniel Leone, head of corporate real estate and services at Swiss Re, Stefan Sieger, head design and delivery services, Swiss Re, and Mr. Larry Wallace, senior executive coach, organizational consultant, and owner of Wallace Partners. Charles and I joined ICMA last year as the Swiss representatives of the ICMA Future Leaders chapter. The aim of this part of ICMA is to connect young professionals in the capital market space and to contribute a few fresh thoughts to ICMA's work in maintaining and developing capital markets globally. Today's event is meant to be a forum for us to discuss the evolving conditions for young professionals in these unprecedented times, and we cannot guarantee that we'll refrain from using the word unprecedented during the panel discussions. With us today, we have a diverse group of speakers with varying backgrounds that we will hope will be able to provide their perspectives, as well as hopefully a few concrete tips and takeaways for everyone. Before we kick off on an organizational note, towards the end of the call, we will have a short Q&A, and please feel free to already submit any questions that you may have during the call in the question field of the Zoom app. With that, I'd like to hand over to Charlotte, who will start off our discussions with a few poll questions to the audience.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to have two parts for today's discussion. The first part will cover how COVID-19 is shaping or will shape the future of work. And then the second part will be to discuss advice for young professionals like yourselves on how to build a career in this new normal. So to kick off the first part, we thought in order to set the scene, we would do a poll to ask some questions, see a bit where the mood music is amongst yourselves. So in front of your screen, you should see 3 questions where there's the choice to answer one one answer per question. So please, if you could do that now, we'll give you like 1-2 minutes to fill that out. The first question is, when do you expect to return to the office? In less than 2 months, later this year, in a year or later, or never? Second question is more about if you had the choice to not go back to the office and work wherever you wanted to work, how much of a pay cut are you willing to take? This is a big debate now at the moment, if then it would result in reduced salaries if we spread the workforce more globally, or would you want to have a pay rise to cover your increased expenses of working from home? And then the third question to fill out is, did the pandemic affect your willingness to change a job now that starting the job would be done fully in a virtual environment? There you can tick if it didn't have an impact, or if it did, if so, only for internal job searches or also external job searches. You should have the answers in front of your screen. So first question, when do you expect to return to the office? So later this year. So definitely it's not something imminent, but it's definitely in the foreseeable future. So the return to work or offices is still a relevant topic. Second question, are you willing to take a pay cut if you don't need to return back to the office? Definitely not, okay. And then the third question, did the pandemic affect your willingness to change jobs? Overall, not much impact. All right. So I think during the course of the debate, we may touch upon certain of these like answers into the different discussions, but that's helpful also for us to steer the debate. But now to first kick off the first part. So with regards to how COVID will or has shaped the future of work, I think you're all aware. On one hand, COVID has accelerated some pre-existing trends. And on the other hand, it has changed some things altogether. So we'll open up the discussion now. I'll first kick off with Daniel Leon from Swiss Re, who runs also the corporate real estate there. So I think the first burning question, Danielle, is are offices still relevant? Will we still have offices in the future? What's your take on that?
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you for having me. I think we have to look back mid of last year when we saw in the press some headlines that some big companies said that the employees can in the future to 100% or the majority work from home. And then this was a big debate. If you look now, and I follow that very closely, this mood has changed. And why has this changed? And I want to give some short answers on that, what I think. And then we from Swiss Re think that the offices still will have a big importance for all of us. First one is personal exchange is extremely important. And as we see, you don't get everything over the digital channels. So for some processes like the innovation, which gets more and more in these times of automation, where robots take over the more standardized procedures, the others get more and more important. And the offices, and as we know that also from psychology, offices have a certain value in that regards. Second, trust. I think this is sometimes just underestimated. Trust. How do we build trust? It's about building up personal relationships, and their physical proximity is important. And so, for example, in our company, this has a big value also. Joined from the gastronomy, combined that and giving opportunity to work, not just on a desk, but in different environments that you connect with your colleagues. And there will be other reasons, but I think I summarized that now with the main topics. To conclude, I think it will be important. Office is still needed, but we will have to adapt to the needs, more collaborative spaces, and also combining in such hybrid models, where a lot of people are talking about hybrid models, the digital skills, the virtual collaboration skills. This will get more and more also into this workplace definition. I think this is the summary of what I think is the future could look like. Back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Danielle. So basically, offices are not irrelevant. They'll still be around, but it will be more for collaboration and whatnot. And I think another good example is Facebook. So they told their workforce that they could work fully remotely last year, but they're still investing millions into a brand new office in the center of New York City. So just another example that even the tech companies are still putting money into the office spaces.
Exactly. I think you see that, and you know, real estate is changing, the real estate market is changing, but more and more companies start to think a little bit deeper about that question. I think this is from the effectiveness, from the psychology, from the branding, the culture, but also from the leadership type. And I think we have some experts also here on the call. This is important, you know, and has to be discussed.
Great. Maybe with that, a question to Stefan Sieger. In your view, will the home office decrease or increase the transparency that employees will find themselves under? Will it make it easier to be more visible? And given your background, we would also appreciate this if you could answer this also a bit from a technological point of view.
Thanks, Max, for the question, which is a highly relevant question. Let me focus on the question of, let's call it the digital footprint we all leave, right? Which is more the question of transparency on what we are doing. And I think the point here is technology per se is not the problem. It's more the question how we use it. And I think there are two usage which I think are very interesting and I have seen increasing over time. The first one, I call it the quantified self. So the technology helps you to understand how are you using actually spending your time the whole day. I think that's highly relevant, because if you're sitting at home, you have no commuting time, which means you go to your PC, switch it on, and never switch it off. So there's no natural break, right? Which I think is the problem. And what we have done in Swiss Re, because we are part of this Office 365 ecosystem, you there get a tool which is called Analytics, My Analytics. And what My Analytics tells you actually what you are doing the whole day, and when you're writing email, when you have calls. And what I figured out actually looking at that report, what I read the most emails by far between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the evening. Which now I leave it up to you to figure out whether that's a positive thing for your life balance. But these kind of insights help you then to structure your day in a way that you probably can have a balanced view on how you spend your life. And the second topic is the question of big brothers watching you, right? Which is a highly relevant one. And you might have seen in the press that Novartis has gone out and told to the press, actually, we have this cool tool, workplace analytics, where we can see how the team actually work with each other and what the patterns are in how they work and how they collaborate. And here, I think if you watch the data privacy, this tool can be highly relevant and really interesting and a positive impact on how people collaborate and help them actually to see that you leave somebody aside and do not involve that person, which is also highly relevant if you cannot talk to each other physically, but you have to rely that everybody comes in virtually. So in short, I think, yeah, definitely. Digital technology and the fact that we work remote will increase our digital footprint, and here we really have to be smart to understand how can we leverage that to our advantage, and are not that afraid of your big brothers watching us, but more or less how let's use that to become more productive in a positive sense.
Yeah. And do you also see a trend towards employees trying to use that data and trying to make sort of an efficiency score on their employees using sometimes simplified tools such as just keystroke counts or amount of emails sent or sort of amount of time in front of a screen?
Yeah. No, I think that's less the point how you type. It's more how you spend your time. You know, do you spend enough time in collaborating? Do you have enough time on focus time? And one interesting feature is actually, because there is AI behind it, so the system can automatically book in your calendar time to focus, which is it's a little bit scary if you think about it, but it's really highly effective. So you just have that time in your calendar blocked, where it's just you focus time, and it's really helpful. And it's really not on that detailed level; it's really more on the overall level to make sure you have a good balance in your calendar.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
With that, maybe a question for Gunnar Hauptmann. The St. Gallen Symposium has always been a forum where personal exchange and also cross-generational dialogue has played an important role. Based on your work with the symposium, how do you foresee this increasingly virtual environment to impact the format and probably also industry conferences in general?
It's obviously a big challenge for us, and essentially it breaks down to two big chunks. If you look at it, one of the challenges is trying to find alternatives to convey content, essentially on a platform where people can have a constructive, exchange on a certain topic. And the second challenge, which is the much bigger one, is trying to find sort of alternatives for people to network. So typically, if we're honest, also probably amongst this group, one of the largest reason why you travel to conferences, it's next to the content, it's sort of the informal changes, having a glass of wine with people, networking, getting to know other industries and all of that. So for the first part of that challenge, finding a good platform, that's not that big of a challenge, because you can first of all buy that technology, and through that crisis, it has been enough development to find good solutions. And for us, for the symposium, that means from May, we'll have a setup with different hubs around the world, 10 to 12 hubs in Swiss embassies and at our second office in Singapore and Boston, and we'll link those hubs together, and through that we'll get sort of a physical/digital interaction. And just from a digital perspective, there are solutions which we'll be using in May, which sort of offer a more immersed feeling. You'll walk onto the campus at the university digitally. You can actually walk into session rooms and all of that. So there are solutions there, and it's much more from an organizational standpoint, much more like organizing a big TV show for 3 days and having like a director in the back. So that's manageable. The second part is the bigger challenge, so the exchanges between people that you can't really plan, and that's where it needs creativity, and that's also where we're struggling with a little bit, and which I'm guessing the industry will as well. Just some of the formats I've seen from the digital web so far is a lot of one-way streaming. So this whole interaction part, I think, is the big challenge. And there are some good solutions. One would be to curate meetings a bit more, which is what we're doing. So if we're knowing that Bas, CEO from Novartis, wants to meet a couple of young entrepreneurs within the digital health sector, then we can get them together. And the other one is to use sort of elements of gamification to link up people randomly throughout the conference. We're developing together with the German site, or we're using a platform that the German site has developed to have people fill out a quick survey on, for instance, political opinions, like you just did, and then allocate people who have given completely different answers just to get people talking. So link up a Trump voter with a Biden voter, and just get sort of informal exchanges going like that. But that's the way we're going towards, and I think those are the two big challenges.
Okay, great, thank you. And sorry, just as a follow-up question, what concerns do you hear from the more junior parts of the St. Gallen Symposium regarding the future of sort of work, this format, and education?
Yeah, so we obviously have a community of about, just through the past 10 years, of about 10,000 what we call leaders of tomorrow. And we use that community to sort of get insights, what they're thinking, and sort of where their mind is towards. And regards to sort of the future of work, it's typically elements of concern that it's just part of an overall transformation that is has been accelerated through that process. So this change in what kind of role do humans play in work in the future anyway, through the automation processes and all of that. That's just probably a sort of a disruption that has been accelerated quickly, and those are the concerns that we hear from our what we call leaders of tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, then maybe, because now we've talked a lot about what has changed or what could be accelerated, but I think there's also a lot of sometimes hype, but maybe one question I would have for Larry, given also your wisdom from consulting and coaching and also from academia, what do you think will actually not change going forward?
Well, one of the things I think to be mindful of in this environment is that there's something very basic about work. Work for most of us is a very important community, and as social animals, as human beings, we're hardwired to be a part of a community, to contribute to that community, and to want to get something from that community. So that's never going to change. The slight problem today is our communities are morphing into something very different, almost exclusively virtual. And we'll eventually get back to a more familiar sense of what work community means, but we won't for a while. And I think the majority of our participants today said that they won't go back to work until maybe at the soonest later this year. So what are some things to be mindful of that is fundamental to what a community does and how a community serves us that we need to think about and needs to be front of mind over the course of those 9 to 12 months where we're still working in this sort of distorted community of virtual work? And I would say some things suffer very much. The first thing that I would say suffers is collaboration. So in 2009, IBM had 40% of its workforce working remotely. And in 2017, it issued an ultimatum that everybody needed to come back to work. And if you worked remotely, you probably weren't going to have a job. Yahoo's CEO in 2012 issued an edict, again, in the company to say there will be no remote work. And the reason that both of these companies cited is that collaboration was suffering severely. So what I would ask everybody who's listening today to think about is, how is collaboration in your job suffering? Where are you missing opportunities to collaborate? Where are you not reaching out when you could? How could you be more proactive in that way? Another aspect of community that serves us very importantly is much of what we learn in organizations is through our community, not interestingly in a classroom, but through other people, through observing people, through working with other people, through hearing how they deal with a client or how they handle a difficult conversation with an employee. And again, in this isolated, remote, virtual world, there is less opportunity for people to learn in those ways, in those informal ways. So what I would ask everyone is to think about, what opportunities for learning are you missing? And what do you need to do to, again, initiate interaction with people that you know you can learn from? And the final thing I would say is that networks are suffering. Networks are critically important for all of us. Networks are very much at the heart of how organizations function. And they're very much at the heart of how we succeed in organizations, being effective within a network. It's very much, networks are very much dependent many times on our own career progression. So how is your network suffering? What could you be doing to maintain and activate your network that maybe in the face of so many Zoom meetings a day and so much kind of overwork and stress that you're doing, you're not paying enough attention to? How can you keep that network that's so important to you alive?
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, so in a way, yeah, quite a few, in a way, basic human needs also, which, you know, they will still be there, the sense for community, as you say, or network or collaboration or learning. I think also from the more corporate or company perspective, maybe lack of better collaboration maybe means also lack of innovation or creativity, which is what also companies really need. So it's in a way a two-way thing. Yes. But I think we can wrap it up there for this first part in terms of looking now. Okay, so based on what you've all said on what has changed or will likely change or not change. And then we'll go now over to the next part in terms of what advice you would all give to young professionals based on these various points. I'll hand over to Max.
Thank you, Charlotte. So yes, as said, for the second part of the discussion, we wanted to focus specifically on the advice that the panel participants can today give to the young professionals on the call today on building a career in the new normal. For that, we'd like to set the scene with a second set of poll questions. If we could get those, thank you very much. So the first one is, what's the biggest risk to your career with working from home? I think the first point we already touched on, the fading network, losing touch and lack of visibility with colleagues and seniors. Second one, no opportunity for informal learning from coworkers, lack of self-discipline, potentially leading to lower productivity. Distractions at home. I think we can all have our own examples of that. And then the second one is the flip side of the first question. Essentially, what are the biggest benefits in your view to your career with working from home? Better ability to concentrate, avoiding office politics or inefficient meetings, flexible working hours, which can enhance productivity, of course. And then the lack of commuting for many that also leads to decreased stress and allows more time for actual work. All right, so in the first question, I think the fading network and lack of collaboration clearly plays a theme here. Then the informal learning, I think, was also a prominent point that was touched upon earlier. Whilst the self-discipline and distractions at home seem to be less of a focus for the participants of the call today. In terms of the biggest benefits, a more varied picture. I think a lot of participants here like the ability to work more flexibly, which allows them also to be a bit more productive. And the lack of commuting is clearly an important part here as well. With the results of these polls, maybe a question to Stefan again. How do you best show visibility when you're working remotely? If you're the only one in your team that's working remotely, how do you sort of avoid the perception from the other team members that you might be slacking off?
There are two parts of that. First one is the basics, right, which is probably is relevant for everybody. I think you have to agree in your team, actually, right, on kind of these roles, responsibilities, and this kind of, I call it this terms of conditions in a way. If you do work remote and the rest is in the office, that needs to be a conscious decision. So they also accept that, because otherwise they get the feeling, why do you do not come to the office? What do you do beside that? So that's very important that you design that. We in Swiss Re, we call that, or the basis for that is the own the way you work principles, where we actually encourage that the team itself agrees on who works when, but also where. And it's a very important component that you make that explicit, so you agree that in the team. That's the first part. The second part is, if I look at the audience, you know, and keep in mind those are the future leaders. So I would probably see those people then as the true digital natives, right? The younger generation, which are probably have a big benefit. Or if I look to Daniel myself, you're more the seasoned talent, and you are kind of the young talent who are really embrace that digital kind of skills, which means you have to play that to your advantage. And I can tell you, if I look a little around the seniors, they barely know how to use those tools. And you, as digital natives, you must be excellent in that. And you have to play that really systematically, use the digital tools in a way so you really be seen, you're being seen creative, you're seen as leading in that space and helping actually the seniors to deal in that virtual collaboration. That could also be when using the tools itself, that you just can use it better than others. Or it is another thing is that you use other channels. Like what I have experienced and seen is that a lot of people have to start to write articles on LinkedIn, which means you open a second channel where you can share what you kind of want to be known for. And I think that increases visibility tremendously, not only internally, but especially also externally. So I guess kind of a win-win on two things. That's what I would do if I was you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, then maybe I'll jump in because the second answer, which got the most responses, was the topic of losing out on informal on-the-job learning. So I would ask you, Danielle, how would you recommend to go about to still get that informal on-the-job learning from other senior colleagues if you are not in the office or if they are not in the office in this environment?
I think this is a very difficult topic, and I think Larry said that before. You know, the whole network and the learning through also looking at the non-verbal behavior, and I think from the unconsciousness, we know that we learn a lot by looking at others and then doing the interpretation. This is difficult through that channel here, but you need to plan that. And I just can give you my example. I'm responsible for almost 500 colleagues, and I'm trying to connect with them to give them the opportunity to learn. But, and I think this is important, I almost never get some indications what works best for them. And we plan informal meetings. We ask the divisional head, which is me, what for me would be an important topic, and I did that, shadowing some more experienced seniors, and this has to be planned. You know, when we were in the office, this was easily, we could say, okay, you shadow now for 2 days, now you have to do that. And what I started to do in projects, when some GTPs came in, so the young trainees, you know, and then we said, we connect you to the more senior guys. And I also took somebody with me just to get a flavor of how my day looks like. So change of perspective. But once again, this has to be planned. And I can just say in Swiss Re, we are very open for that. And sometimes we just don't get the idea, you know. So I encourage you to come up with some ideas. And if you have a boss with a little bit open eyes, you know, they will buy that.
Okay, so basically, yeah, the informal learning, you have to kind of just set it up, be more explicit, be more proactive to create planned sessions.
And ask questions, you know, ask the questions. This is for me, I don't understand, you know, you open it up and then you wait for the questions, because let's also be very honest, I don't know exactly what's worrying my teams, you know. I know it logically from my direct reports, but if we open up the channels, this is a unique opportunity to learn from each other. We also learn from the young people. This is clear, and I think times have changed. Openness is there, and I think this is a unique opportunity for all of us.
Cool, thanks. I'll pass over to Max. I think you had a question.
Yeah, exactly. I had another question for Gunnar. So in the new age, how do you communicate, build trust, network, and connect better with people, given that a lot of the interaction will be virtual? And I think given that trust matters is also the theme of the 2021 St. Gallen Symposium that may be particularly relevant for you.
I mean, yeah, the trust obviously is sort of the glue that ties it all together, isn't it? And I think particularly in the past months or throughout the crisis, we've seen sort of a decline in that in many aspects, and obviously some of these aspects that have been mentioned, sort of trust towards your employee or your employer is certainly an aspect, but also just between people, trusting them to sort of follow the guidelines for the corona measures, trusting our political institutions to sort of find the right remedy to get us out of this mess. So it is a big issue, and that's going to be throughout the corona recovery probably one of the bigger challenges. But one of the good things is that we can certainly try to reestablish or strengthen trust through communication also in the virtual world. And one thing that we found through our sort of topic development leading up to this year's Trust Matters topic, but also through our community engagement, which is where we typically speak to experts on the field, such as FBI negotiators who have to establish trust quickly in a certain setting, is that it all connects to empathy, and that's something I think that's more difficult to establish in a virtual field, and that takes more effort. So meetings have to move away from sort of a fact-based mission where I call you, Max, with a certain information that I want to convey, towards much more sort of an empathetic exchange on things that go beyond the facts that I want to convey. And we've seen sort of from our perspective in developing this topic, but also through our sort of connection to research and scholars in that field, is that people actually appreciate it more, even from senior leaders. That if you open up, if you show your vulnerability, if Daniel also shows to his employees, I don't know the answers yet because I don't have the visibility in terms of COVID or to a certain question, sort of showing this vulnerability pays off and makes the leaders more graspable and more understandable, and having an interest for that, and also showing your own sort of vulnerability also makes you as a junior guy more interesting and more memorable also in the meeting. So I think communication in the virtual world, it just takes more effort. It takes more effort. It's less fact-based. You have to show an interest in the other person. You have to spend more time on individual meetings, which is in many ways counteracting to what people think they can do through a virtual setting, which is save time, have more meetings in a shorter period of time. So that's sort of our perspective on it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll just like wrap up with one more question to Larry, and then afterwards we'll open up to the Q&A. So maybe just to Larry, given you're an executive coach also, so now we've given the tips more for young professionals, but what would be your tips to managers with regards to how to manage better, how to create more collaboration, which you said was something which gets easily lost, or how to motivate a team when they are working remotely? Because as the poll at the very beginning suggested, we're definitely not going back to the office in less than 2 months. So this will definitely carry on for a while. So what would be your tips to managers in this environment?
Yeah, well, I think that I want to build on some things that Gunnar said. 3 pieces of advice for managers in this environment: communicate, communicate, communicate. That is the essence of, I think, what you do to be effective as a manager, especially in this environment. The sad truth is, if you weren't a very good communicator before all of this happened, you're probably a worse communicator now. So it's a good time to reflect on both the quantity and the quality of your communication to your team. So if I were to ask you right now to rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of your ability to communicate both quantity and quality, 10 being excellent. And what I would say excellent involves in this environment is over communication. 1 being hunkering down and just kind of being in your own world. Where would you put yourself? Are you closer to 10 or you're closer to 1? A couple things to think about. Communication is not well served exclusively by Zoom, by chat, by email. Those are necessary but not sufficient. And especially in today's world, the Zoom thing has become overused. People have Zoom fatigue. People have Zoom overload. And if you think that you're communicating well because you're doing a lot of Zoom meetings, I would challenge you to think about that. Pick up the phone. Talk to your people one-on-one. Check with your people to see how they're doing. Very, very important. Also realize that there are conversations going on around you with your team members. People are talking about the work. They're talking about the future of the organization. They're talking about you. And to what degree are you part of that conversation? It's a question I think very important for all of us to answer, whether we're a manager or not. And to the extent that there are a lot of conversations going on virtually or not around you that you're not part of, you're compromised as a manager. Finally, I would say there is a special need to communicate, over-communicate with new joiners. If you have new people coming into the organization at this time. There's a study very recently that came out of Germany saying that the attrition rate of new joiners has really accelerated during this time period. Many people are leaving within a 6-month span of having joined an organization. You as a manager have a special responsibility to shepherd that new person into the organization. The new person doesn't have any ability to kind of pick up on what's in the air, what's in the ether, who talks to who influences whom, what matters, what doesn't matter. You are an especially important coach for that new person. And so I think the extension of that, if any of you, 30% of you said you wouldn't hesitate to change jobs in this environment, if you are a new person going into a new organization, recognize that you are more vulnerable potentially than you would have been in normal times, just in terms of the information, both implicit and explicit, but mostly implicit, you have access to.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I think definitely the new joiner topic is key, especially for many also young professionals on this call. That's definitely not an easy one. Yeah, thanks.
With that, we have arrived at the Q&A part of the webinar. I see we've already 3 questions submitted so far, but we'd like everyone to join in and submit any questions that they may have. In the meantime, I think we can already start off with the first question that we got. What's your opinion on regulatory initiatives such as the European Parliament's right to disconnect resolution to protect workers' health? Is there anyone that'd like to go first on that one?
Well, I go first. I think, look, it's directed into the protection of the mental health, personal resilience, and I think I don't know, and I just question that if you can order that from governments, and I think it's much more important that different employers or companies stand together. The right to disconnect, I think it's extremely important, that question in these days. And we know that, not just because of burnouts, you know, because there was one other question about efficiency and productivity. You need time to disconnect, to refresh, to be ready to restart. And I think this was also said by someone before. If you don't have the breaks, you cannot change. And I think you need that mental, also for your mental thinking, you need these breaks. So I'm skeptic. I have some skepticism that somebody can impose that. But the discussion, and I just for our company, this is discussed, is getting discussed. And I know from other companies, this is very high on the personal resilience agenda. So we look left and right. And I think this is much more successful if companies, as in the sustainability area, we are also part of some leading companies, go in that direction. This is my view.
Any further remarks to that question, or? But yeah, I think from speaking of personal experience, you definitely notice the boundaries blur much more with the home office, and you often spend much more time in front of the screen. Which then maybe goes to the, oh yeah, sure, Stefan.
Just one comment, and the topic of the right to disconnect is not a new one. You might remember that Volkswagen once actually made technically sure that people could not read emails during whatever hour, right? I think it's an upcoming topic again. I think what we also have to learn as employees how to deal with that. So it's also kind of has a learning aspect to that. But I'm here also in the camp with Daniel, right? Whether you can, I'm not sure you can order that from the top. It needs to come both sides. We need to find a good balance, what's ordered from the top, but also what you as kind of a professional also make sure. But there's some people, they do not want to disconnect. Just the fact of life. That's their purpose in life, to be disconnected all the time. And to a certain extent, we have to find a good balance. What do we accept, and whether we have to help those people that they do not burn out easily.
Yeah, but perhaps Stefan, to add on that, we saw, I think that the two of us last year had a tremendous year together in looking at all the different studies. We saw high flexibility. People want that. Means they want to work wherever, whenever, not on whatever, but the first two. And I think this is important, the freedom to work. So how far do we go with that? Do we restrict that? I think this is an important question. And if you have leadership from every seat, you have a different picture of the human being that can regulate herself. And if you change that, then this has a society, regarding the society, a different picture. And, you know, I don't want to get philosophical, but this is an important one. Can we, on our own, decide when to work, or do we need somebody, as Stefan said, who cuts the lines? I think we should first see how can we make it sure that we have some kind of natural regulations and also behavior setting by the leaders, that it's not expected to work day and night.
Yeah, we're creating like a framework there. Maybe then we have another question. Maybe this can go more for Gunnar or Larry. So say COVID doesn't disappear, not next year, not the year after, but kind of this is a situation for, you know, more than another year. what do you think we can do to mitigate the risks or the disadvantages of working from home, such as the whole diminishing network, if this drags out for more than a year, more than 2 years?
Well, I think there are a lot of things people can do, but they're not things that people are used to doing, because the environment still feels rather artificial. So on an individual level, for instance, kind of marrying the concept of networking and collaboration, for instance, doing things like taking initiative to identify important issues that the organization needs to work on. Maybe they are client-related issues, maybe they're product-related issues. They could be a variety of things. Volunteering to spearhead a task force on that, organizing your own network to work on something like that, showing that kind of leadership and that kind of initiative. What sort of, on another note, informal kind of mechanisms are you putting in place? A lot of organizations that I work with and a lot of team leaders that I work with organize things like virtual drinks and virtual dinner parties and things like that with the team. And as kind of unwieldy and sort of just weird as that sounds, they actually work, I'm hearing. People like them and they welcome them and those kind of things. So I think you're only limited by your own imagination in terms of these kind of things, these kind of mechanisms that you can invent. And finally, I would say, nominate a mentor for you. Who could you be spending more time with in the organization? Who could be an advisor to you and a mentor to you? And how could you set up a meeting once a quarter with that person, or once every month, or something like that? Again, a huge number of opportunities, and I would just encourage you to go for it.
Cool. Yeah, no. Yeah, I guess one has to make it just simply more explicit, whereas before you randomly bumped into someone and you could talk or network, and now you just have to plan for it.
That's right.
Maybe Gunnar, do you have any add-ons to that? Or
I don't want to add too much, but it is I think it is a fact that this crisis, probably like no other before, presents a lot of opportunities to also create. Because the cards are shuffled completely new and it's unprecedented. So most of the organizations that you're working in or that you will be working in don't really have a playbook by how to get out of it. So showing initiative, like Larry said, coming up with good ideas to network and maybe spearheading, or also a unit within your organization to drive that along. I think those are the opportunities that you need to grasp. And the second part, I think, is certainly don't underestimate how much purpose people have previously gotten from going to work and getting this informal exchange. So try to also find the balance, either then in your professional life through projects or in your personal life, to find that balance, to level that out if it continues for a longer period of time.
Okay, cool, thanks. Then I have one question to Stefan and also Danielle with regards to why we work, with regards to like corporate culture. So, if linking to what also Larry had said before, that, one of the reasons we also work is a lot for human connections, to be part of a community, etc., which might get a bit lost in this remote work environment. If this continues, how do companies maintain that strong corporate culture, especially, for example, Swiss Re, where they have a strong canteen culture, which is a lot about in-person things, or doing sports together or offsites? How do you maintain a strong corporate culture virtually?
I think I go first, Stefan.
Hey, sure, please.
I think Larry said that communicate, and he said communicate. This is important, that we use the channels, new channels, the formal, the informal ones, to get closer together. I think also when it's about culture, it's about showing the growth opportunities in different levels, not just on the ranks and going up, but on the personal side. And there, I think it's extremely important to give some individual treatments. What does it mean? Look at your situation, and you have a stake in it. Look at your situation, make a plan, and share that with your line manager, with your boss. And Larry said mentor. I had a similar idea, I said the shadowing before. I think you need to plan to whom you should talk to in a period of time, and then make yourself an objective regarding communication, about periodicity. And for us, it's extremely important to bring people together. Stefan, perhaps your view.
Just to add a little bit, I think it's a big challenge for companies as well, right? It's not just from the employees that they have to involve and be active, whatever. It's also for the employee. And I think it starts with, if you're a company who happens to have a strong purpose, that makes it much easier to people motivate and keep connected, right? If you don't have that, it's a little bit more difficult. But I think when I look at Swiss Re, we do a lot at least to try to keep up with that culture connection. We did the Resilience Day, a great initiative. So jointly as a company say, now we take a day off and want to recharge batteries. Those are the actions which people will remember. And those are the actions which also then shape the culture, right? And you need much more of things that are extremely visible, and you also can remember and have a kind of a joint experience. That's when culture is being found. But it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Cool. Thanks. So I think we have 2 more minutes left. So maybe I'll pass over directly to Martin to give the final closing remarks.
Thanks very much indeed, Charlotte, and thank you also to Max for steering those discussions so expertly, and thank you also to all the panelists. Personally, I found that Personally, I found that extremely interesting to listen to, and I think there are a number of takeaways that we can all learn from. One is that the office will still be important. Physical exchanges are going to remain important. Trust is quite an ephemeral thing, and building trust in whatever way one can is going to be absolutely critical. I think it's also a very interesting comment. I can't remember who made it, that this generation, the future leaders, are actually in a very, very good position to benefit from a blended virtual stroke physical world, because you are the digital natives and you can really play those skills to your advantage and really shine in this environment. And I think that's very important. Empathy was a word mentioned a number of different times, and I think that combined with the focus that we've heard about communication is probably the most important takeaway. You need to be very focused on the way that you communicate in all directions, horizontally, up and down, and it needs to be very, very systematic. We've heard about mentoring, we've heard about shadowing, and these types of mechanisms for making sure that there is communication and building these networks, which will fade if it's just on in the virtual way, unless they're maintained and nurtured and brought to the fore. That's very, very important. But I think there are also a number of messages in there for the employers, and that is clear that they need to look out more for the employees, to work through with the employers, make sure that people take their holidays, make sure that people don't feel pressured for presenteeism, albeit behind a screen, and take some time out to recharge their batteries. So personally, I found it extremely helpful, and all I would like to do now is to thank Max, to thank Charlotte, Daniel, Stefan, Gunnar, and Larry for your insights today, and to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much.